Slater Crusaders. America's the greatest country in the world. Thanks for being here. I hope you had a meaningful Memorial Day weekend. Or as Kamala Harris calls it, a nice long weekend. Hope you had a fun long weekend, everyone. You saw by now Kamala Harris's tweet on Friday. Enjoy your long weekend. This cartoon here sums it up quite dramatically, yet perfectly. Now, on, do we have that cartoon, guys? There it is. On Monday, I should say, she sent out her obligatory, honoring those in service. But what kind of nonsense is enjoy your long weekend? I think the worst part, though, is she put up that, triumphant glamour shot of her looking off into the distance. So I'm like, what is that? Enjoy your long weekend. Here's a picture of me. Not to be outdone, though. I thought this was a joke. I thought this was fake. I thought someone made this up. But this is a real tweet from the actual president, at least for now, until Kamala takes over. But here's the actual president. He said this tweet on Friday: "Stay cool, folks." What? Stay cool. Memorial Day weekend, stay cool, folks. Good night. I don't know what it is. The media and Joe Biden and ice cream. There's this weird, do you remember it was 2 weeks before the election and all this Hunter Biden stuff was in the media and the news are being hidden, suppressed by the media. And Joe Biden finally made an appearance buying ice cream somewhere and the media is super far away. And a guy goes, Mr. Vice President, like super urgent. Mr. Vice President, what flavor did you get? And it happened again just this week, the other day. Here, listen to these sycophants.
Mr. President, what did you order?
Chocolate chip.
Oh, yeah. Mr. President, what is your message?
Oh, I love chocolate. Oh, Mr. President, wow, chocolate. Jeez. I saw a appropriate meme. It said, "Your day at the beach, brought to you by their day at the beach." And I had a picture of the men storming the beaches of Normandy on D-Day. Your day at the beach, brought to you by their day at the beach. Hope you stayed cool. Kamala also spoke at the graduation ceremony of the Naval Academy last week, and she had this gem of a line. Because our military is woke, we have a woke military, but not woke enough for Kamala. Here's what she did.
And just ask any Marine today, would she rather carry 20 pounds of batteries or a rolled up solar panel? And I am positive she will tell you a solar panel, and so would he.
Ask any Marine today, and she would tell you. We are such a sick society. We're sick, we're diseased, we're weak, we're frail. Ask any Marine, and she will tell you. Girls and Boy Scouts, and we send our women to the front lines. You've seen, I think we played this the other day, the Chinese and the Russians have their military recruitment ads. You said, look at this stuff. There's Chinese and Russian military recruitment ads, right? You got warrior, strong men in concrete barracks with giant guns and missiles and fighter jets and tanks. Our military recruitment ads are cartoons of little blonde girls raised by lesbians. That's our woke. Oh, hey, I'm from California and I was raised by my two moms and I've been in Pride Parade since I was a little girl and now I joined the army. Like that versus this. We are decadent. Decadent's one of my favorite words because I've always thought, and I still think when I first hear it, that it means what's the context you're decadent? When do you ever hear the word decadent? It's always for a chocolate cake, like a decadent chocolate. Oh, it's decadent. It means delicious. It's over the top, right? So it implies something of very high quality. Oh, this is decadent, opulent, right? It's the opposite of that. Decadent means decaying, right? D-E, day, that means down or apart. And cadere is Latin, mean to fall. It literally means to fall apart. We, America, we are decadent. We are falling apart. Our woke administration telling us to stay cool, enjoy your long weekend. Thanks for your service, ladies. Sorry about you having to carry heavy things. That's America today from our commander-in-chief. I want to use that as a springboard to talk about men here for a minute. Kamala can't even get around to say the Marines are men, which is it's just more attacking of men and masculinity. So here's the story. A couple days ago, Lockheed Martin, our friend Chris Rufo uncovered these documents. Lockheed Martin, which is the nation's largest defense contractor, their top executives had a 3-day white male re-education camp conference, white male conference, to deconstruct their white male culture and privilege. And we have the documents from it. It was run by a consulting company called White Men as Full Diversity Partners, helping white males, quote, awaken together. So let me start off with the thing that annoys me the most. You see these words right here on the screen? So this is one of the slides from the presentation that they put forward to these top executives at Lockheed Martin. It was a free association experience. All right, so they say, okay, all right. What words come to mind when I say white men? Okay, so I say white men. Okay, just yell them out. What words you got? What words come to mind? And there are the words, for people who may be listening to the podcast, let me just read a few. Old, racist, privileged, Aryan nation, KKK, can't jump, right? Words like that. And I've seen this exercise done many times before. And they always have the same types of answers. And what that is a bunch of men who don't have any honor. They've been raised and been living in this culture for decades now that treats men like garbage. All men in our culture are think about the cultural icons of men as portrayed in pop culture. Who are like the dads in pop culture? No Andy Griffith. It's Homer Simpson. Al Bundy. Phil from Modern Family, right? You name the bumbling idiot dad. That is how men are portrayed. If I was in that room and you say, all right, everyone here, white men. What do you hear white men? First of all, I'd say, doesn't matter what color, but men, I'd say, protector. And I'd be the weirdo in the back of the room yelling, loving, brings order to chaos. Oh, I got a good one. Courageous. I'm like, that's not exactly what we're looking for. We're looking for more Aryan nation, clan members. That's the kind of thing we're looking for. I'd be like, adventurous, decisive, serving, caring, loving, right? No. Not anymore. And here's the truth. When we killed God, we killed masculinity. We removed God from our popular, everyday thoughts. And with that, men became weak. We now have nothing to aspire to. Our ideal is in tatters. Who are you to aspire to as a man? If you're raising a boy to be a man, who is that boy? If you look around in pop culture, who's that boy to aspire to? Al Bundy? Homer Simpson? What? Even Jesus, in our popular imagination, as much as he's even in it anymore, is this wimpy guy who's always walking around with a sheep under his arm. You're like, right? But that's not the fullness of who Jesus was and Jesus' masculinity. Now, here's the real thing. What's at the truth of masculinity? We got to be able to define this very clearly and live it, obviously. What's the root of masculinity? If you were in that room, what's the number one thing that you should yell out when someone says, what's the first word that comes to mind when you think men? White men doesn't matter, right? The white part. Men. When you think men, what's the first thing that comes to mind? The first thing that should ever come to mind everybody is responsibility. And nowhere on that list at Lockheed Martin, again, I've seen that many times, that exercise done, and I've never seen that list where someone yells out, responsible. Men are responsible. Jordan Peterson has a great riff, and he talks about how you must pick up the world on your shoulders and walk forward. Pick up the world with all of its trouble and suffering and evil and move forward with it. And in bearing that burden, you learn that you're the sort of creature that can bear that burden, and therefore you are deserving of respect. You acknowledge that there's just bottomless evil in the world, but you decide still to take on that challenge, right? So you're not going in thinking, oh, everything's hunky-dory and amazing and wonderful. You no, this is a broken world, but I'm still gonna take it on. That's what a man does. You know who can't take on evil as that challenge? Men like those at Lockheed Martin who, when they're tasked with defining masculinity, say, angry, doesn't listen, racist. Those people have lost their honor. They have no honor. And people with no honor and no self-respect will not, are less likely, but will not pick up their responsibility and will not stand up against the evils of the world. If you don't have honor, you're not going to be responsible. End of story. So who are you, man? Who do you want to be? And who do you want to raise your kids to be? And the unfortunate true story is that men are so beat down. They're either actually beat down, or men so feel the pressure to act like they're beaten down that they give these negative characteristics of masculinity. And it's pathetic. It's absolutely pathetic. I can just imagine the men who yelled out those answers to define what is white man, and they yelled out these ridiculous things. I would just look at that guy and be like, dude, what are you doing? So the people who acknowledge this is a problem, I imagine we're on that page here, a lot of them would be like, oh, these men need more self-esteem. No, we don't need more self-esteem. Self-esteem is so shallowly defined as just feeling good about yourself. So we need men to feel good about themselves, right? So men we need to say things to them, and men need positive affirmations and say nice things about themselves so they can feel good about themselves, and then they'll go out into the world with better self-esteem. No, we don't need better self-esteem. Men need more honor, and you build honor by doing things. You build honor by standing up against evil and standing for good. You don't just say things and feel better. You build honor among yourself and then honor among the people around you, and you earn that respect. So knock it off with first, knock it off with the self-deprecating self-flagellation of men are racist, bigots, anti-women. Knock it off with that. And knock it off with, oh, we need to build self-esteem. No, you need to build honor. And then we'll live it out. Men are responsible. Part of responsibility is preparing for emergencies. It's one way of providing for your family, isn't it? Right? You are to prepare for anything. My Patriot Supply, right? They, of course, have all the food. 2,000 calorie meals, right? So there's an emergency, and we brainstorm this all day. It's just like a basic natural disaster, right? You got a natural disaster coming in, and you can't go to the grocery store. That's like a basic thing. I don't know, maybe global pandemic? That's another one. And there's plenty of more in between. And you just want to avoid people. Maybe there's a disruption in the food supply, but also you just don't want to be around people. Like, all right, you let you crazy psychos fight it out at Costco. I'm not going there. We're all set. So 2,000 calorie meals. No one else comes close to that. But they also have everything that a self-respecting man needs to have in order to be prepared, right? So first things first, buy the 4-week emergency food supply. It's like owning a drill. I saw some poll the other day, and it was like 20% of millennial men own a drill. Okay, right? So like every self-respecting man needs a drill and a 4-week emergency food supply. Just get it. It's not even something you need to budget for. Just do it. Just go buy it once. It's good for 25 years. So if you're from now until 2046, you're protected and prepared. But they also have everything else you need, not just food. They got water filtration is super important, right? You think people panic when food supply is low? You think people panic when gas supplies were low, like they were the other day in the Southeast? How about when the Russians hack into our water supply? You want to see people freak out? So water filtration, all the gear you need, emergency blankets, fire starters, everything. My Patriot Supply, but we set up a special website, preparewiththefirst.com, preparewiththefirst.com, and you get $50 off their 4-week supply. So get that done. Coming up next, we'll talk about the California created this lottery for manipulating people into getting vaccine. We'll tell you why that's a very, very bad slippery slope. Next. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. On Thursday, the governor of California announced the California vaccine lottery. So here's how it works. The next 2 million people who get vaccinated will get a $50 gift card to a grocery store or just whatever they want. It's just a $50 gift card. The next 2 million people. So that's $100 million. Everyone who's already been vaccinated is entered into a lottery. 30 people are going to win $50,000, and then they're going to take half of it in taxes too, right? But 30 people are going to win $50,000, and then 10 people are each going to win $1.5 million. That's the lottery in California now for vaccines. So coming up, I want to talk about why this is a terrible, slippery slope, and also completely unnecessary. But first, and sort of to back up that last point that I'm going to make, we need to know what we're dealing with here. So I have 3 updated points of perspective on how little of a threat COVID is, all right? 3 points of perspective on how tiny of a threat COVID actually is. First point, 0.0000007%. Okay, that's the number. Dr. Lucy McBride, she's from Harvard and Johns Hopkins. She's talking about kids here. She says, per our calculations, the chance of outdoor transmission right now is approximately 0. That's 7 zeros. I don't even know what that number is. Is that like 7/10 millionths of a percent or something? I don't even know how you say that number. The immediate threat to kids being unmasked outdoors is not rooted in science. All right? Second point. This is Emily Oster from Brown University. She says probabilities like this, she's an economist. She says probabilities like this are hard to think about because they're so small. One way to think about it is, and this, she's not talking about kids anymore, she's talking about adults, but whatever, same thing. She says if you had 5 outdoor interactions a day, you would expect to be infected once every 109 years. All right? That's how tiny of a threat we're talking about from COVID. Third point. This is a great example here of how the game of telephone can really screw things up, even in the scientific community. So if you remember last couple of weeks, we've mocked and ridiculed, and more than that, been properly outraged by the CDC's guidance for summer camp. Masking kids at summer camp, outside running around. It is absolutely cruel and insane. It's cruel. So you're asking, you're like 5-year-olds running around outside with masks. It's out of control. So what's the science? What science is this based on? This is the head of the CDC when she was asked specifically about masking kids outside in summer camp. Here's what she said to justify it.
With regard to the New York Times piece this morning, there's a meta-analysis from Journal of Infectious Diseases that was published in November, I believe, where the top-line result of all studies that were included in the systematic review said less than 10% of cases were transmitted outdoors. It is that meta-analysis that combines science from all sorts of, all different science from many different places. I think over 19 studies were included. The top-line result was less than 10%, published in the Journal of Infectious Diseases, one of our top infectious disease journals. That is where that came from. It was a published study that synthesized study from many places.
Okay, wrong. I went back to that study that she was talking about. First of all, notice she says outdoor transmissions are less than 10%. That's very different than close to 10%. Pick up on that. She says the chance of outdoor transmission is less than 10%. So when I hear that, I think, oh, like 9%? 9.5%, 9.8%. No. She says, she said less than, not close to. A few hours after she said that, Dr. Nushin Razani spoke up. She was the author of that study that the CDC director just talked about. She said, hello, over here. She said, my paper is not a meta-analysis. You heard the head of the CDC. That's not this random woman on the street. The head of the CDC says, it was a meta-analysis. And the author of the study says, it wasn't a meta-analysis. It was not a meta-analysis. It was a systematic review. We don't need to go on the whole scientific understanding of what that is. They're different. A meta-analysis is precise estimates based on data. A systematic review is much more general. The head of the study says, we didn't do a meta-analysis. Now, here's the important thing. Less than 10%. She says, okay, here's what we did in the study. I think it was 19. We looked at 19 separate studies. Every study had the chance of outdoor transmission under 1%, well under 1%. There was one study, though, where it was approaching 10%. One. You want to know what that study was? That was a study of construction workers in Singapore. And it turns out that around 10% of transmissions of these people were from outside. But these were construction workers in Singapore, as you see here, who bunked together in dormitories when they weren't working, but they were classified still as outdoor workers when clearly the transmission was inside in conditions like that. All right? Now, here's the author of the study. She says, again, this is the study that the CDC used to justify putting masks on kids outside in summer camp. The head of that study, the person behind that study said, our main point, people should spend time outdoors to enjoy nature and be active. Being outdoors is essentially the best ventilation that one could ever imagine, as particles have the space to infinitely dilute, disperse, and eventually disappear. Being outdoors is an important resource for personal, physical, mental health, and to increase ventilation. Isn't that amazing? But there's the head of the CDC saying, well, I'm in here. So let me make this point. I'm sorry, I kind of skipped over this. Less than 10%. Okay? This would be like, and a New York Times writer made this comparison. This would be like saying sharks attack fewer than 20,000 people a year. Did you know that? Sharks attack fewer than 20,000 people a year. So how many shark attacks are there every year? If I say it's fewer than 20,000, what do you think? 19,000? 19,500? 19,800? 150. Sharks attack 150 people a year. So if I said less than 20,000, it's true. It's technically true. It's just wildly misleading. So it's true. We shared the fact with the doctor from Harvard and Johns Hopkins, right? Saying that your chance of outdoor transmission amongst kids is point and then 7 zeros and then the 7%, right? 10 millions. Is that less than 10% chance? Yes, it is. Is it close to 10% chance? Not at all. If you asked what temperature it was outside, and I said, well, it's under 100 degrees, what would you think? It's a scorcher, 98, 99. No, it's 55. You said it was under 100. Yeah, it's under 100. So for the head of the CDC to say, well, it's less than 10%, that is, they've lost all credibility. And I mean, will they ever recover it? And I don't know if they ever will recover it because honestly, they never should have had it. I don't even know why they have so much credibility in the first place. Remember, the CDC, they're the same people who tell you not to eat raw cookie dough. The CDC, they issue warnings every year. Don't eat raw cookie dough. Do you eat raw cookie dough? Do you know why you're not supposed to eat raw cookie dough? Most people think it's the salmonella from the raw eggs. It's that but mostly flour, raw flour may have E. coli. Your chance of getting E. coli from eating raw flour and raw cookie dough is way higher than being vaccinated outside with COVID or kids at summer camp. It's way higher. Do you still eat raw cookie dough? Of course you do. What if I told you, the CDC says you shouldn't eat raw cookie dough? You'd be like, okay, better not, whatever the CDC says. The CDC, they've always been party poopers. They've always been scolds, right? They've always been around your back being like, you better not have that drink of alcohol. Very dangerous for your liver. Better not eat that raw cookie dough. You could get E. coli. They've always been that grandma who always is telling to the grandkids, don't hurt yourself, don't be careful, don't run, don't climb, chew, 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 swallow your food, but don't chew, don't choke, blah, blah. Nonstop. That's what the CDC does. And they're wrong. And now they're lying to you. They're being misleading on purpose. They know, or wildly inept, I guess, if they don't, right? So stop listening to them. They've undermined their own authority. Which brings us back to the vaccination lottery in California. It's a slippery slope. The idea that the government can now just come up with lotteries in order to manipulate people into doing what people otherwise wouldn't do on their own, that's not a good precedent, right? Just think moving forward now, people don't, whatever, and whatever the government wants people to do, and they're like, well, let's just give away $1 million. Let's give away 100 million. That's $116.5 million, right? Let's just give away $100 million and then people will do it. It's a very bad precedent moving forward. But also it's not necessary. It's just not necessary. California, 50% are fully vaccinated, 20% are partially vaccinated, add in people who have already had COVID and recovered from it. All the research coming out now says that antibodies are lasting for over a year. We're at 80, 90% immunity in California, and I'm surely across the country as well. It's over, we're done. Even the New York Times wrote an article saying immunity can persist for years. So what else are we gonna have the government make lotteries for to manipulate people into complying? What other risk with a 0.0000007% risk will the government use to justify forcing your compliance on? True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, I love this lab leak story. There's so many elements to it. There's so many things to learn. First, the media hacks, and that's what I want to talk about coming up in this segment here, and the next one too. But also virologists, right? It's a tricky situation we're in because if you're wondering about where this virus came from, you're going to talk to virologists, right? But virologists have every incentive to say, oh, it didn't come from a lab. Right? Oh, no way it came from a laboratory. It came from that, right? They have every incentive to do that, lest people freak out, politicians ban all their experiments, no more gain-of-function experiments, whatever. They lose their livelihoods, they lose their research, they lose their funding, they lose everything, right? So they have every incentive not to tell you about a lab leak. So what are you to do? Well, you're supposed to use your brain. That's what you're supposed to do. Then you have the political angle on all this as well. When President Trump, Tom Cotton first, and then President Trump mentioned that it could possibly come from a lab, well, the media had to take the opposite opinion, of course. Here's John Carl just the other day, finally coming around to why the media did this.
And yes, I think a lot of people have egg on their face. This was an idea that was first put forward by Mike Pompeo, Secretary of State, Donald Trump. And look, some things may be true even if Donald Trump said them. And because Trump was saying so much else that was just out of control, and because he was, making a frankly racist appeal, talking about Kung Flu and the China virus.
First of all, Kung Flu is not racist. It's funny. Second of all, I love that line. Some things may be true even if Donald Trump said them. Malik Abdul is here. What's going on, Malik? How are you, brother?
Oh, man, I'm telling you, I'm listening to this nonsense that you have in the background, and it is ridiculous.
Amazing how the media not only blew this so badly for a year and spouted Chinese propaganda, but now they're trying to cover for themselves by saying, oh, well, we didn't have all the information we needed, so we were just skeptical of the theory. It's like, no, you can't trick us on that one.
No, and it didn't at all, because remember, Donald Trump actually responded. He began talking about Wuhan virus, really in response to China essentially blaming U.S. soldiers for bringing the virus over to China. That's how we got there. And the media kind of misses that. But you saw just on Sunday in the when I think it was Brian Seltzer, I can't think of the New York Times author, who essentially said that, well, Tom Cotton said it, so that gave us reason not to believe it. How irresponsible is that? You are a journalist. You're not a political commentator or a pundit on television. You're literally a journalist. And this is what you're actually out there doing, saying, don't believe what people who share a different ideology says. It's irresponsible, but it is indicative of what life was like under Donald Trump when it comes to the media.
Yeah, you're so right. And you're right, so right. I forgot all about the Trump calling it the Wuhan flu and stuff was an escalation of China saying it came from the American military. I totally forgot about that, but you're 100% right. Good bring up. We're going to save this because I want to talk more about this with our next guest in the next segment here. Let's pivot here just a second to a tweet you sent out the other day about a 16-year-old boy who was killed in Washington, D.C. And the point you made was this doesn't make any news at all. It does. No one even bats an eye about it. How sad.
Yeah, and in fact, there are a couple of things that happened, but the 16-year-old, this is something that we see on our streets all the time, where there's actual violence on the street. The reason that it doesn't make the news is because it doesn't fit the actual narrative. So the things that make the news typically are interactions with police, particularly in Black communities, or a white person killing a Black person. That's what makes the news. We saw what happened with the whole Asian, Stop Asian Hate. There was a lot of incidences over the past year that the Asian community have actually spoken out against. It wasn't until the killings down in Atlanta did this Stop Asian Hate thing begin. There's so many things that we don't focus on, even if we're talking about something like police-involved shootings. We only talk about police-involved shootings or police reform or police brutality when a Black person is the victim. That's why we aren't able to move forward, because we don't have open and honest conversations about it. And people in media, they just kind of gloss over it as if it's not really a thing, when those of us who live in these communities know these are things that we see happen on our streets. And while we go out and protest against this, the media is 100% of the time not concerned at all.
Yeah. Two questions. What's the root of that narrative? Like, why do they do that? And then what are we to do about that?
Well, one of the reasons is that race is sexy. It creates a very toxic environment to really foment race. I'm using President Bush's term, fomenting. It actually is very profitable to sell this notion that white hates Black. White people hate Black people. Black people are victims. Black people need we can't get voter ID, the Ds and things like that. These things actually feed a narrative. And I think the biggest reason why they do that is because, in fact, it actually keeps us tied, as far as Black people, it keeps us tied to the Democratic Party. They don't want independence. They don't want freedom of expression or any of the things that they claim that they want. And so we go down these roads where you have incidents all over the country, and nobody can do anything about it, because if you say something, if you disagree, especially as a white person, if you disagree in any way, what the critics say is that then you are encouraging or endorsing white supremacy. So there is no conversation. There is no discussion, because the minute that you disagree, you are a white supremacist apologist. That's what the media does.
And if I brought up a story like this, if I brought up this one that you tweeted about, the 16-year-old who was shot, well, now I'm what? I'm portraying the Black community as gang members and murderers only, and perpetuating those stereotypes or something like that, right? So you're gonna know when.
Yeah, and you really are. And that's why it's important for us, people like me and others, to actually get out and start talking about this. I think that, even conservatives, we have to be careful that when we're talking about Black on Black crime, Black on Black crime is no different than white on white crime. The problem is that because so many of us are isolated to these urban centers, we are typically affected by it in ways that maybe others aren't. And this is where the media pays all of the attention. No, we need to have honest conversations about it, and not just criticizing or trying to attack Black people who live in these communities. Have honest discussions. I have honest discussions with my community all the time about things that we can do to actually fix this. These are things that we talk about all the time, but they don't make the news because the news is less interested in what we're doing to actually solve this than the perpetrators of it. So the white supremacists who are out there actually perpetuating this, they don't want to talk about it because it doesn't fit their narrative. If we look at across liberal media, the only thing that they want to focus on is white supremacy, or more recently, the Capitol Hill riots, where no one has actually been charged with an insurrection. But that's a discussion for another day.
Yeah. I only got about a minute, but I saw this morning that the founder of Black Lives Matter chapter of St. Paul, Minnesota, resigned because the organization he created stands for, with the teachers unions, in not allowing charter schools, which is the ticket out for so many people, and they're against actually Black lives. So he resigned because of that, which is awesome. And then I saw the mothers of Tamir Rice and Breonna Taylor spoke out against Patrisse Cullors, the founder of Black Lives Matter nationally, saying she benefited off the blood of our loved ones. So you talk about being profitable. Patrisse Cullors just bought her 4th house just outside Malibu. A lot of money to be made in this activism, isn't there?
Yeah, and I'm going to do something a little different. I don't think that the issue with Tamir Rice's mothers, the fact is that they can, yes, they have a right to feel how they do about Black Lives Matter. But the fact is that the Democratic Party actually trotted them out. If you want to talk about who did something that probably was offensive, it is the Democratic Party. Remember the 2016 election cycle, they were at every single event talking about, their children. So the Democratic Party actually used them, and I won't say props because that's, can be a bit offensive, but the Democratic Party actually used them to further their goals of winning elections. They need to start looking at the Democratic Party as much as they're looking at Black Lives Matter, because from a political perspective, the Democratic Party is the one responsible for them actually being pushed out there in front of the body politic.
Malik Abdul, good to talk to you, brother. Let's do it again.
Thank you.
Nice, man. Good stuff. Coming up next, John Tamny here. He's got a new book called When Politicians Panicked, about the beginnings of COVID and people's reactions to it. We'll talk about that next. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, new book's out. It's called When Politicians Panicked, the New Coronavirus Expert Opinion and a Tragic Lapse of Reason. It's by John Tamny, who is the vice president over at Wonderful Freedom Works. John, how are you, sir?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me on.
My pleasure. We have a ton to talk about it here. I just, now that this is all over, it's going to be really important to go back and properly sift through the history of it and how this all happened. What was the point one of many, that you noticed was like, oh, this is when everything went off the rails. This is when this went from, Nancy Pelosi saying, come on down to Chinatown, it's no big deal, to all the people, particularly on the left, totally losing their minds?
It's a great question, because what you describe as having happened is what happened. Nancy Pelosi was encouraging people to come to Chinatown. Bill de Blasio was telling New Yorkers, go to the movies. He was riding on the subways, encouraging New Yorkers who'd already taken precautions on their own to get out. But I think what was the tipping point was when Austin Mayor Steve Adler, out of nowhere, canceled South by Southwest. I think it was a shocker to the marketplace, to people, and it led to a lot of other things, a lot of superfluous things. As we know, as has been documented, Americans across the country, and in particular in the states that locked down last, started taking precautions ahead of time. They started buying masks. Whether they worked or not, it's a different story. Started buying hand sanitizer. They were making changes on their own. They were going out less. And then all of a sudden, politicians took away their freedom, and that's when the chaos started.
I want to talk about human nature, because that's what this is all about, I think. And I look back on the first cruise ship where there was a breakout, and I don't have the numbers in front of me. Maybe you remember some, but like a certain percentage of people got sick, a certain percentage of people died, which ended up being about what was true nation and worldwide. It was nothing compared to the projections. But those initial case study, that petri dish on the cruise ships, were just thrown away for these wild models that came out from the experts. Why did we not look at those first initial realities? I know the intro of your book, your co-author talks about FedEx, some FedEx employees who a certain number got sick and they all recovered. But we forgot all that and went down this crazy hysteria dystopian train. Why?
It's a great question. I mean, I'll first say the ultimate petri dish was China. The virus has been spreading for months in China. They didn't lock down or anything because they didn't really know about it. And yet we know that it wasn't an indiscriminate killer. And how we know is because if it had been, U.S. share prices would have been plummeting in 2019 toward the end of the year. Because Starbucks has 4,200 stores in China. It's the second largest market for McDonald's, second largest market for Nike. Apple sells a fifth of its iPhones there. If the virus had been killing indiscriminately, we would have seen it in U.S. share prices right away. But you bring up another important point. They ignored all this, all the market information saying, the virus exists, but it's not very lethal. And then they said, well, the Imperial College study says 2.3 million. Well, what if it said 30 million? What we know is that Americans were going to take precautions that government could never dream of. The bigger a threat of a virus is thought to be, the more superfluous is government action. So the government action was never warranted. We're going to protect the hospitals. No, who needs to be told to avoid behavior that might result in hospitalization or death? Americans were doing this on their own. They didn't need to be forced.
What's that line you just had? You said the proportionate, the deadliness of the disease. Say that again, because that's so brilliant.
The more threatening a virus is, the more superfluous the government force is. Because if it's believed to be a killer, if it's believed to cause hospitalization, Americans, people in general, are going to take precautions that governments could never imagine. We're innovative people.
Yeah, so imagine if this was like the plague, where half of a city was killed. Then you're right. The government wouldn't need to tell you to do things. It was only something like COVID that was like bad enough, kind of to where they needed to come in all draconian.
Microscopic, and they take away our freedom. I mean, imagine if they had said, or what if China had said, the death is concentrated among kids 5 to 15. Can you imagine the reaction in the United States? The levels taken by parents would make any kind of force by government seem meek by comparison. What's not said enough, and what our side has to say over and over again, is we've got to make sure that history is written right.
Yep.
Precisely because they thought the virus was lethal and dangerous. Explained loudly why they should never have done anything, because we were going to take care of this on our own. Lockdowns were inexcusable. There was never an excuse for lockdowns.
All right, I got 30 seconds, John. What's your rebuttal to it? Yeah, but 600,000 people in America died. So it's not nothing, John.
No, and no one's ever said it's not nothing. What if it had been 6 million Americans? Americans would have locked down far more stringently than what they're required to by government. Yes, Americans did die. Now, of course, we know that most of them were very old and already very sick. And so they died with the virus, not because of it. But again, the bigger the number, the less you have need for government force.
All right, this is a really important book because, as you said, we need to make sure that the history of this is accurately written. Otherwise, it's going to be written by people who we don't want to write it and will be used as further justification down the road for the next thing with a 0.0000% chance of killing you. Really important. John Tamny from FreedomWorks. Thanks for writing this and thanks for being here, John.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you. Go get the book. It's called When Politicians Panicked. John Tamny, Tamny. When Politicians Panicked. All right, Slater Crusaders, have a wonderful day. See you tomorrow. Spread the word.